Let's go back in time just after World War I to New Orleans. A city that's famous for its amazing celebrations and, of course, as the birthplace of jazz. But from 1918 to 1919, that incredible music was almost drowned out by a wave of pure terror. A mysterious killer was on a rampage, and it turned the Big Easy into a city paralyzed by fear. So our story starts not with a loud bang, but with a soft groan. It's the morning of May 23rd, 1918. In the back of a small grocery store, a scene of just unimaginable horror is discovered. A husband and wife attacked while they slept. But this wasn't just a murder. No, this was the chilling first act of a nightmare that would last for nearly 2 years. And the killer? He left his calling card, the victim's own bloody axe.
And this killer wasn't just some shadow lurking in the dark. Oh no, he had a voice, a taunting, arrogant one. He would eventually write to the city's newspapers, literally daring the police to catch him. He claimed to be something not quite human, making it crystal clear that he thought he was untouchable. These words would just echo through the streets, cementing the legend of the Axeman.
Okay, so let's get into the details. Our story really begins with Joseph and Catherine Maggio. They were Italian grocers running a little grocery and bar right on the corner of Magnolia and Upper Line. Their lives were about to come to an end in the most brutal way you can imagine. You see, Joseph's brothers, Jake and Andrew, lived right there in the same building. Around 5 in the morning, Jake gets woken up by these strange noises. When they finally force their way into their brother's room, they find Joseph on the bed, just barely alive, and Catherine on the floor, her head almost completely severed. The killer had used the couple's own axe and then slit their throats with a razor, which he just left behind in a pool of blood. The bloody axe itself was found on the back steps. Right away, a really clear and disturbing pattern starts to emerge. The police noticed that someone had chiseled a panel right out of the back door to get inside. But here's the weird part. A safe was open and empty, but cash and valuable jewelry were just left there. This wasn't about robbery, it was about the act itself. This terrifying method, the chiseled door, using the victim's own axe, and ignoring valuables, would become the Axeman's signature. The Maggio murder was horrific, but believe it or not, it was just the start. Over the next few months, more attacks followed, and each one mirrored the last. A serial killer was on the loose, and New Orleans started to fall into a state of citywide panic. So, less than 3 months after the Maggios, another grocer, Joseph Romano, was attacked. His teenage nieces, who were sleeping in the next room, were woken up by the sounds of a struggle. As they rushed in, they caught a quick glimpse of the attacker fleeing, and this was the one and only eyewitness description the police would ever get. A dark, tall, heavy-set man. But, that vague description did basically nothing to calm down a city that was already arming itself against a phantom. And of course, the newspapers were fanning the flames of fear. This quote from the New Orleans States paints such a vivid picture. A city completely under siege, where regular people felt they had to stand guard themselves, armed against a killer who could just slip into any home at any time. Then, in March 1919, after a quiet winter, the Axeman came back with a vengeance. But this time, he didn't just leave a bloody axe behind. He sent a letter, gave himself a name, and made one of the most bizarre demands in the entire history of crime. This letter arrived right after the attack on the Cortamilia family. Yet another grocer. This one was particularly awful because it claimed the life of their 2-year-old daughter, Mary. In all the chaos that followed, the grieving mother actually accused her neighbors, who were then wrongly convicted. It's just a tragic example of how the city's terror was leading to this profound injustice. And it was in this climate of fear and confusion that the killer decided to speak. Can you imagine reading this in your morning paper? The letter, published in the Times-Picayune, was just chilling. The author claimed not to be human, but a demon straight from hell. He mocked the police, threatened more victims, and officially gave himself the name the Axeman. He was crafting his own dark legend, turning himself from a simple murderer into this supernatural boogeyman stalking the city. And then came the twist. Tucked inside this demonic rant was this really strange proposition. The Axeman declared he was a big fan of jazz music, and he promised that on the upcoming Tuesday night, he would spare anyone who was in a home where a jazz band was playing. He warned, if you don't jazz it, you would get the axe. So that designated evening was March 19th, which happened to be St. Joseph's Night. a huge celebration in the city's large Italian-American community. Faced with this terrifying and frankly bizarre ultimatum, the people of New Orleans had a choice: cower in fear or party for their lives. And they chose to party. On that night, the city just exploded with music. Professional bands, amateur musicians, they played in halls, in cabarets, in private homes. The entire city was filled with the sound of jazz, including a popular new song called The Mysterious Axeman's Jazz. It was this surreal, defiant celebration. And, true to his word, the Axeman did not strike. But here's the thing, one night of music wasn't enough to appease a demon. The Axeman's promise was only for that one evening. His reign of terror was far from over. The attacks continued, from Steve Boca, another grocer who actually survived, to Sarah Lohman, who was attacked through an open window. The fear came rushing back. The bloody spree finally culminated on October 27, 1919, with the murder of Mike Pepitone. He was killed in his bed while his wife and 6 children were in the house. And then, silence. After the Pepitone murder, the Axeman of New Orleans just disappeared. No more letters, no more chiseled doors, no more bloody axes left at crime scenes. As mysteriously as he had arrived, the killer was gone, leaving behind a legacy of fear and a dozen unsolved attacks. So with the terror finally over, the question that has haunted New Orleans for over a century remained: who was the Axeman? Well, there has only ever been one really significant suspect, a career criminal named Joseph Maggio. Now, the evidence is purely circumstantial, but you gotta admit, it's pretty compelling. The Axeman's quiet period from late 1918 to early 1919, that lines up perfectly with the time when Maggio was in jail for burglary. And he left New Orleans shortly after the final murder, the murder of Mike Pepitone. Then, in this final dramatic twist, Pepitone's widow actually tracked Maggio down to Los Angeles and shot him dead, reportedly telling police he was the man who had killed her husband. So was this vigilante justice or just a tragic mistake? So what are we left with? Was the Axeman just a man? A violent criminal like Joseph Maggio who maybe got away with it and just moved on? Or was he something more? Was he the demonic spirit he claimed to be, who just vanished back into the ether, leaving behind nothing but a chilling story and a timeless, unanswered question?